Hello everyone, my name is Karen and I'm a clinical psychologist and I work for the Northern Neonatal Network. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this shortish video. This is a recording of a presentation that I did recently for an allied health professional conference where I was asked to talk very briefly about working with uncertainty in neonatal care. Now if you need to pause the video as we go along to make notes, feel free to do so. And there will be some QR code links at the very end to some hopefully helpful resources. So I'd like to start by inviting you to think about a moment in your work when you felt really uncertain, when you genuinely didn't know what was going to happen next. Not just this might be tricky, but a time you really didn't know, you felt really uncertain. Perhaps it was waiting for test results. Perhaps it was a baby whose condition kept changing. Or perhaps it was a conversation with parents when you knew there were no clear answers. So just take a couple of seconds to bring one of those to mind. Now I'm sure that just about everyone listening will be able to think of an example. Because if you work in neonatal care, uncertainty is not the exception. It's the waters we swim in. And it can be really tricky, can't it? Because as human beings, we don't tend to like a lot of uncertainty in our lives. We're designed to have nervous systems that really like certainty. The human brain is fundamentally a prediction machine that prefers clarity, control, and knowing what is coming next. And when those are missing, the brain tries to assess whether something is dangerous or not. And this is the same for internal as well as external experiences. And when we can't answer confidently that we are indeed not in danger, our brain defaults to the better assume it might be dangerous then. What this means is that uncertainty itself is then processed by the brain as a form of threat. And when faced with threat, our brains, and by extension our bodies, do what they're designed to do. It organises our physiology, our thinking, our reasoning, our motivation, and our behaviours in safety-seeking harm prevention ways, more commonly recognised as fight, flight and freeze responses. Now we actually understand these responses as protective strategies that can become over-applied in uncertain contexts. This is particularly relevant in neonatal settings, which are rapidly changing, high-stake environments for babies, for their parents and families, and for staff too. So I'm going to talk about the impact of uncertainty on parents and staff in particular in this video. Let's think about parents first. For many parents, neonatal care is like living in a state of suspended animation. Life is happening, but it doesn't feel like real life. And typically, their threat system is constantly asking, am I safe? Is my baby safe? What do I need to do right now to prevent disaster? Sometimes parents don't know if their baby will survive or what the long-term outcomes will be, or even when they can take their baby home. Now we know uncertainty isn't the whole story. There are also layers and layers of loss inside this uncertainty. For example, loss of the expected birth experience, loss of a sense of control, a loss in an expected role. Parents often report that they're unsure of the kind of parent they're allowed to be in the neonatal care environment. For so many, there is the loss of a simple, ordinary beginning to parenting a new baby, and with that comes a huge amount of uncertainty. So what is the impact of that kind of uncertainty on a new parent's nervous system? We know that threat and uncertainty changes how the brain processes information. Working memory is reduced under stress, which means parents often can't take in or retain complex explanations. Therefore, decision-making becomes much harder. Inconsistency can feel intolerable because the nervous system is already overloaded. And because of the way our threat system organizes our thinking, feelings, and behavior, parents can appear hypervigilant, anxious or controlling, perhaps tearful one minute, feeling numb the next. They can easily veer between constantly scanning staff for reassurance and feeling emotionally withdrawn. So when we meet parents that we may relate to as difficult, what we're very often meeting is a person with a nervous system in survival mode, in a situation that would overwhelm any human being. And underneath all of this is a nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do, trying to survive the unbearable experience of loving someone you feel you cannot protect and who none of us can predict the future for. It can be helpful to remind ourselves of this when we're struggling with a family facing a lot of uncertainty. And not just the impact on those parents and their responses to it, but also the impact on us as clinicians too. So let's talk about the other side of the incubator. Working with uncertainty is not easy for staff either. For staff, I'll also be highlighting how a compassionate, psychologically informed approach can help us hold uncertainty without becoming hardened, overwhelmed, or burned out. Now notice I've not said I'll be talking about how to get rid of uncertainty, but this is about how to work with it in a way that feels humane, sustainable, and deeply aligned with why most of us came into this work in the first place. Now, as highly trained clinicians working in neonatal care environments, you are trained to assess and intervene. There's a pressure to fix and to ensure progress is made. Patients are hopefully expected to improve. It's a big responsibility in a high-threat system and a high-threat environment. We've already talked about uncertainty being the waters we all swim in. Even when we are trained, experienced, and feel confident, uncertainty can activate our threat systems too, particularly when we are dealing with it over and over again. The impact of uncertainty can show up in us as working clinicians in many different ways. Have a think about how it might affect you. For many, it might show up as feeling and being over-controlling, or overworking, or over-explaining, or perhaps it shows up as emotional distance, and just sometimes feeling a pressure to sound much more certain than we really are. When our threat system is activated, particularly in a prolonged and persistent way, it can become harder to regulate our own emotional systems and therefore help distressed babies and their families regulate their emotions too. We know that in neonatal care systems, staff can carry a moral distress with persistent thoughts of, I wish I could do more, or this doesn't feel fair, or I don't know what the right thing to do here. This is a very real impact of this difficult work. And if it has nowhere to go, over time it can lead to compassion fatigue or burnout, or even just a subtle hardening that may protect us emotionally, but also has a hidden cost. The point I'm making is that uncertainty is not just a clinical issue that can be important to address. It is an emotional, relational, and organisational issue too. So how do we manage uncertainty more effectively in neonatal care? I'm going to go over a couple of different ways to address this psychologically. So I've talked a lot about our nervous system being activated in threat. So I'm going to give some context to this now. Compassion-focused therapy is a biopsychosocial model that teaches us that we have a three-system emotion regulation system, sometimes referred to as the three circles. And these three circles are a threat system, a drive system, and a soothing system. Each of these three systems has a different function and is strongly associated with different evolved motivations. For example, the primary motivation of the threat system, as we've already talked about, is to detect and respond to danger and to prevent harm or loss or rejection. Our threat system is focused on keeping us safe by avoiding threat where possible, avoiding pain where possible, or avoiding shame. The drive system is primarily motivated to move towards goals and rewards. It organises us in ways that support pursuing or achieving things that we need or want. The drive system is focused on getting things done, solving problems, achieving competence or success, and securing resources, and that includes approval from others. Our soothe system's primary motivation is to connect, to care for others, and to be cared for. It's motivated to create safety through relationships and is focused on promoting rest, recovery, and regulation. This function enables bonding and attachment and allows for trust and openness. This also allows us to feel connection, not just responsibility, and makes space for co-regulation between us and others. Now, generally, we tend to feel more regulated overall when these three systems work in balance with one another. But neonatal environments are, understandably, heavy on threat and drive. Both of those systems override the soothing system. However, compassion is one important element that can activate the soothing system, and this can be activated in several ways. Compassion-focused therapy talks about the three flows of compassion: compassion for others, compassion from others, and compassion for ourselves. And most neonatal staff are incredible at the first, and often much worse at the other two. But the systems themselves do not sustain compassion if the staff are emotionally starving. So we know that for lots of people, compassion can have negative connotations. Lots of professionals often are very driven. Many fear that in order to be more compassionate, especially flowing compassion to ourselves, must mean they have to lower their standards or spend time avoiding reality. It isn't. It's about creating the emotional conditions in which humans can cope even in the most difficult of times. And there are skills that you can learn that will help you understand your own three-circle system and also help you engage in compassion practices that can help you balance out your three circles and activate your soothing system. There is a Padlet of resources around compassion focused therapy and compassionate mind training that you might find useful if any of this resonates or lands with you, and the QR code is at the end of the video. Now, there is a beautiful idea from another psychological model called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. And this is also really useful in helping us manage uncertainty more effectively. A core idea of ACT is psychological flexibility, which is the ability to stay open, aware, and engaged even when things are painful and uncertain. So instead of fighting reality or shutting down or being driven entirely by fear or anxiety, ACT helps us to be present and learn to unhook from thoughts that are unhelpful. It helps us to make room for what's hard, such as uncertainty and not knowing. ACT helps us to notice our thoughts without being ruled by them. This is called diffusion. Doesn't it sound great? ACT helps us to be guided by our values. Our values are the qualities in us that matter to us, and engage with how our values motivates and inspires us so that they show up in a way that in how we treat others and ourselves. It's about how we take small, meaningful actions every day. Both compassion-focused therapy and ACT have really useful components that we can all use in our work and our lives every day. But they can take some time to understand and develop skills. Therefore, I want to offer you a very simple human flow to think about that you can consider how you might apply in your everyday work, and then maybe think about how you can then incorporate helpful ideas from CFT and ACT. So we start with a threat response around uncertainty. Uncertainty, as we've talked about, triggers cognitive and emotional activation. When we are dysregulated, we can't think clearly. We struggle to hold complexity, and decision making is much more difficult. So this emotional activation needs regulation. So how do we do that? Some basic ways are around regulating with our voice, our pace of communication, our presence, and our body language. To support regulation in the face of uncertainty and emotional activation, we want to try and present an outward calmness, even if we don't feel like that at first. Now, this is easier to do when we understand our own and other people's threat-based responses. So think about this for a second. What helps you feel grounded during difficult emotional times? How can we learn to unhook or diffuse, to use ACT language, from difficult or distressing thoughts or emotions that might block us from feeling more regulated? As clinicians, to help the other person, maybe the parent or even a colleague, to regulate, we need to be able to listen, to be more present, and probably give them some extra time to digest what we are saying. Only then can parents and we begin to process what is happening and what is being said. Remember, when emotions are too intense or too shut down, the mind can't process, reflect, or integrate information effectively. Therefore, with emotion regulation comes a greater capacity for adaptive meaning making to become possible. We can, or the other person can, mentalize what they are feeling. This means they can access multiple perspectives, and this helps them understand why it makes sense to them. And only when we're feeling emotionally regulated and have some adaptive meaning can compassion then enter the picture. So how do we know when adaptive meaning making is happening? We might hear a mum say, I can't control the outcome, but I can love my baby today. Or another parent might say, this is how I'll love my baby today in this moment. For staff, they might think, I can't fix this, but I can be a steady or kind or compassionate professional in this moment. Or just simply, I can be with this baby, this family, even though it feels hard. Being able to make adaptive meaning is so important for our nervous systems. Not only can it help bring our soothe system online, it also helps to restore connection. Authentic, compassionate connection is often what we all need as humans when our regulatory systems have been disrupted. And we know that this disruption happens often in neonatal care. And one part of that is living with uncertainty. But connection is what makes uncertainty more bearable. So what does this look like in practice for parents and for ourselves? Creating connections and supporting parents looks like drawing on our compassionate courage and wisdom and naming uncertainty in an honest but gentle way. It's about regulating before explaining, like the flow diagram showed, and validating emotional reactions even if you don't understand them. It's about supporting parents with tiny acts of agency, with touch, with voice, with care, which is the stuff that you do every day. And of course, it's about helping parents to reflect their love and their presence, and not just their competence. So in neonatal care, this might sound like, we don't know what the outcome will be yet, and we know that that feels hard. It might sound like, I can't promise outcomes, but I can promise you honesty and care. And it might sound like, this is frightening, and you're not facing it alone. And even today, there are ways that you can be your baby's parent. Now, supporting ourselves and each other is also important. How do we do that? Often it's about normalising and naming the emotional impact this work has on us all. Now, we can do this using reflective spaces. And if you haven't got this in your workplace, how do you create them? Sometimes it's about taking micro pauses or having team huddles, as well as maybe some more formalised reflective spaces. It's about speaking to ourselves as we would speak to any distressed parent or colleague, with compassion. And remember, there are 3 flows, so treating ourselves with self-compassion is so important. As is reconnecting with our values, understanding and knowing what matters to us and how we treat ourselves and others, especially when outcomes are unclear and it feels hard. We can let our values motivate and inspire us in how we want to act. Even when you can't change the outcome, you can change the experience. Parents will not remember every piece of information or every technical detail, but they will remember how safe they felt with you, how human they were treated by you, and whether someone else could bear witness with them when the future felt unbearable. And the same will be true for us looking back on our careers. Uncertainty is not something we can remove from neonatal care, but we can decide whether we meet it with armour and fear, or with compassion and honesty and shared humanity. And I think that's some of the most important clinical work that any of us will do. And if nothing else you take from this video, please hear this. We do not need certainty to act with compassion. And I thank you all for listening very much. As promised, here are some QR codes for some resources that I hope you'll find useful. The e-learning modules was created by the 10 psychology leads in each of the operational delivery networks for neonatal care. So in those there are four modules. The first one introducing psychologically informed neonatal care, and the other 3 modules are around staff well-being, parental well-being, and infant well-being and mental health. So please do go and check those out. They're on the eLearning for Health website. There are 2 Padlets. There's a staff support Padlet and a compassionate mind Padlet. The staff support one hopefully has some good resources on there for you to use and lots of helpful links and articles, and the compassionate mind Padlet talks in a lot more detail about the 3 circle systems and how to use that in your everyday life. And it's really worth checking that out. And finally, The Not Alone in NICU is a book written by Dr. Rebecca Chilvers, who's also one of the ODN psychology leads. And it's a beautiful book, so please have a look at that, and if you like it, please, maybe get one for your unit or recommend it to parents who you think might benefit from that help. And once again, I thank you for listening, and take care everyone.